Thank you for viewing The Voices of a Black Man. My name is CK James, and I am excited for you to be here today. The Voices of a Black Man is a platform for Black men to be able to be seen and heard, telling their story through their lens. As I looked around in society, I saw that a lot of people were telling the story of the Black man, but what was mostly absent was a Black man telling his own story. Didn't mean that they weren't telling their story in any places. It just meant that on a broad scale, we weren't seeing it. I know it to be true that Black men don't are not in your stereotypical boxes. They're not silent, which equals absent, and they're not angry, which equals aggressive. But they are humans who are men, who are Black, with various backgrounds, experiences, with their own dreams and aspirations that are making their mark on their world, their communities, and their families in positive ways. So that's what the Voices of a Black Men platform is about, is to have them tell their stories and for you, the viewer, to sit and listen and then check yourself for any biases that you may have. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Lafayette Jones. I'm super excited to have him today. Mr. Lafayette, are you there?
I am here. How are you, Miss James?
I am doing well. How are you?
Fine. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on your show and express some points of view.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I am one that just gets right down into it. So if you're ready, I'm going to start with the first question.
I'm ready.
All right. Tell us a little bit about young Lafayette. Where is he from? How did he grow up?
Well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. And what's characteristic that everyone knows about Buffalo, New York, there's lots of snow. And so my father and mother jointly owned a landscaping and snow removal business. And my father used to say to me often when I was maybe 10 or 11 and worked for the company, we're too poor to get coal. And I actually believed him. And we worked in sub-zero weather many months of the year. And it was hard and during work, but it was great training, get in good physical shape, get your attitude right, and also to learn a lot about serving others. We had customers who we made sure that the snow didn't stay in their driveway or in front of their home very long, which meant sometimes going to their home twice a day because it snowed in Buffalo all the time. So I grew up as a very hardworking young man in an entrepreneurial family. My mother and father in the off season also sold flowers on the street corner. And so I grew up as a young salesman, maybe by now, then 12 or 13 or 14, learning to sell flowers at the cut flowers, corsages and other lapel flowers for 50 cents or a dollar on the street corner. So I learned a lot about sizing up customers, converting them to, I'd ask what would be called the arresting question. Is your mother living or dead? And we as people, that's a very serious thing. We talk about our mothers. So if you said to me, oh, my mother's living very well, and I'd say to you, well, you need this 50 cents red corsage or red carnation. And if you said your mother had passed away, I truly would be sorry and say, well, in honor and memorial to her, let's pin this 50 cents white carnation on you. So either way, my job was to make sure that you didn't take another step further before you gave me 50 cents and I pinned the carnation on you.
Wow.
So I grew up as an entrepreneur and as a salesperson evaluating work. We also did landscaping. We cut large estates. And one of the things my father would often talk about is there's a difference between a $100 a week customer and a $500 a week customer. And we give them all the best service, but they get different levels of service. And as you grow up as an entrepreneur, which I did later in life, you begin to learn how to price your services and how to serve your customers. So this was built into my DNA. I left Buffalo when I was 16 and went to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. where I had the great pleasure of coming into a brand new world, like any other young college student,
Mhm.
16-year-old freshman. But for me, I went to a historically Black school, and I was just amazed when I got there of a number of things. One of which there were Black people who were actually in charge, counted the money, CFOs, responsible for this multi-million-dollar operation. I didn't know its size at the time. We had about 600 or 700 students, and most of them were women. FIS has been known, excuse me, as well as other historically Black schools, for just some outstanding intellectual Black women and beautiful too. And so for young 16-year-olds turning 17, I was just uh, amazed. But what I learned at FIS was about where I came from, who I was. I met poets, I met artists, I met theatrical people. Robert Hayden, a poet, was my English teacher. Aaron Douglas from the Harlem Renaissance was my art teacher. I talked to them every day, just like I'm talking to you. Arnabon Tomps, the great Arnabon Tomps, was one of the great librarians of the world. These folks were connected to the great historian from North Carolina. I'll tell you his name in a moment. But the point is, I got to see Black folks in charge who were talented and who had done so many things. And I had the other pleasure that in 1961, when I went to Fisk University, it was in the heart of the civil rights movement. As a matter of fact, my classmate was John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis. He wasn't a congressman then. He just was a guy sitting next to me that his last name was Lewis and my last name is Jones. And so they seated us alphabetically in classes that they did, at least in those days. And so he and I talked about many things. And he was an avid civil rights person. And he used to try to convince me that I should go with him. And I'd say, John, I'm a fighter. Um, I'm not a nonviolent person, but I'll be helpful in other ways. Because that was at the time, there were, a couple different ways to go at this. There was a group of people who fought back, and those would be the Malcolm X people. We were very, very protective of our school and our folks, and we would have none of it. And then there were others who were nonviolent. So there was a place for both factions, and we all got along very well because we had the same objective. So I grew up in the civil rights period and went from Nashville to Howard University, where I went to law school and did not like law school. And my entrepreneurial bent came out at that time. Went to law school for a couple of years, and I went into the radio business and learned to merchandise and learned to do consumer promotions. And I did that for a number of years, and then I got very fortunate and was asked to come to. First, I went to Procter and Gamble, which is the hallmark of so many marketing folks and others. And then I had the opportunity to be invited to go to Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue was New York and all of that. And there I learned another level of marketing. It's always been marketing for me. From the time I was a little boy on the street corner, even to this day, it was all about marketing, ascertaining and understanding what people wanted and being able to deliver it to them in a convenient, competitive price way. That's the definition of marketing. So then after that, I stayed at Unilever um, in Madison Avenue. And then I had the opportunity to go to General Foods, which became Kraft. They merged. And I was an assistant brand manager, then associate brand manager. And then I had the opportunity to move to Minneapolis, where I worked for General Mills and Pillsbury. At Unilever, I was responsible for Mrs. Butterworth, which was a syrup. And also I was a sales intern. At Kraft, I worked on Orange Plus and Bird's Eye orange juice. and Awake. Awake went to outer space when we first went to the moon, and that was one of that brand's claims that sold millions of units. And at Pillsbury, I had um, Poppy, little Poppy, Mr. Pillsbury, if you will, Poppin' Fresh it was called, and I ran the Hungry Jack biscuits business. So I've been involved in big brands. These brands were 100, 200, $300 million, depending on what it was. And then I had another opportunity to move to California, to Los Angeles to work for Hunt Wesson Foods, which became a division of ConAgra. And there I helped to create a brand called Hunt's Manwich. A sandwich is a sandwich, but a manwich is a meal. That's a line that my team created, and we took a small brand and we built it to several $100 million. It was um, a tomato sauce business. You know, Hunt company had lots of tomatoes, sauce, paste, ketchup, and then manwich. And then another big opportunity happened while I was there. My boss called me one day, and at the time, there were very few Black people in marketing, none in my company. I was the only one. And that had lots of challenges, lots of opportunities, and um, learned an awful lot. My boss called me in one day and he says, we're looking at a small company called Orville Redenbacher Gourmet Popcorn. And I said, say it again, because no one could pronounce it. So he said, go on down, we live in Cal, go on down to San Diego, and Mr. Redenbacher's in town at his condo and his wife, and go and meet him. And we want to buy that company. We want to know what you think. So I went down and I knocked on the door in this very nice neighborhood in San Diego. And the maid came out and opened the door and she looked at me and she says, what do you want? I guess they hadn't seen many Black people other than just working there. And I asked her what, I said, I'm here to see Mr. Redenbacher. She slammed the door. Then the door opened and this tall, thin, aloysius looking guy with a part in the middle of his hair stepped out and he said to me, son, what do you want here? I said, well, Mr. Redenbacher, my company sent me to make some decisions about whether or not we wanted to buy your company. And then he said, oh my God, you're Black. And I looked at him and I said, well, I don't want to work with you either. In those days, you know, we'd fight you in a minute if you stepped on our toes. And he said, I don't mean it like that. He said, I would have thought somebody would have said that you were Black, because we don't get a lot of Black people coming over here. And that was the day Orville Redenbacher and I became friends. We bought that business for $6 million. Today it's $600 million. And we were able, through a superior popcorn that popped more fluffy, larger, through some very premium pricing and great marketing. Had great marketing agency and team and research and development. We created the first microwave popcorn. Microwave popcorn in the early 70s was not here yet. It was just on the drawing boards. And one of the lawyers used to say, and whose house did you burn down this week? Because when we created the product, the bag would catch on fire. And if you ever notice microwave popcorn, it says, don't leave unattended, stay there if you, and so that revolutionized the popcorn business. And we were leaders because prior to that, heat and oil were the medium to popcorn. That's the old fashioned way. If you might be too young to know about popping popcorn in a kettle, but that's how they used to do it. It was pretty good. But microwave popcorn was much better because it was more convenient. And we watched our business grow almost 20 times its size in 1 year because of microwave popcorn. Mm. Well, up came a great lesson for me. I thought I would be the next director of marketing for that group, and the opportunity came up, and I didn't get that opportunity. Probably a lot of reasons I could talk about it. But I care to say it probably was a good thing it didn't happen, because that's how I met Sandra Miller Jones. And Sandra Miller Jones and she had a company called SMSI, the same company we have now. And she invited me to come to Chicago and to come to Chicago and meet a gentleman named George Johnson, who was the founder of Johnson Products, Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen, all of those products, Don Cornelius, Soul Train, all of that in the mix. And I went there and I never met a black man that had a net worth of 50 million. You meet a black man, or I guess anyone, whose net worth is 50 million. They have a different attitude about life, about everything. Probably one of the most polite people I ever met. And he offered me the job, become vice president of marketing, because at the time, a company called Revlon was eating Johnson Products lunch unfairly through some litigation. And Mr. Johnson and his team were very good about creating products. They just weren't rough enough. You know, I'd come from that rough and tumble world where, you know, you kill our dog, we'll kill your cat, in terms of aggressive, fierce marketing. And so that's one of the things that I brought to the table, plus a lot of research. And Mr. Johnson had already created a new product called Precise Conditioning Relaxer. And he showed it to me in a tube and he said, this is the future of the company. And black women had been using relaxers at that time heavily, over the years, but they wouldn't condition your hair, would dry your hair. So we revolutionized that. And I got there because Sandy Miller Jones, when she called me, she says, I have a great opportunity for you in Chicago. And I heard that you are very good at what you do. A little mouthy, she said that to me. And I said, probably true. She said, outspoken. I said, yeah, that's probably true too. Because if you didn't speak up for yourself through the ages that we came through, you'd be in trouble because there was no one to protect your back. There were good white folks who worked in those companies, of course, but there weren't any role models. There weren't any black men or women that you could even talk to and find out what the lay of the land was, because we were the first of the wave of those pioneers. So she said, you should come to Chicago. I said, well, I called her darling. She later told me, don't call me darling. You don't know me that well. So I said to her, I'm living in Southern California. I'm not crazy about what I'm doing. I'm looking for a new opportunity. But Chicago is far too cold, because remember, I had lived in Buffalo, in New York, in Minneapolis. So I'm going west to get warm. And I love Southern California, where I stayed for 10 years, twice. And she said, just follow the instinct, go out to the airport, get the plane ticket I have for you. And I went to Chicago and I met George Johnson. Again, I never met a brother that was worth 50 million net, none less with a brand new Rolls Royce and one of those fabulous buildings I've ever been to, loaded with black art. I had never been in an environment where I had seen so much original black art. And Don Cornelius would come by, and Toni Morrison. I mean, black entrepreneurs who were on it really had an opportunity to have an impact. So that was my experience at Johnson Products. And one day, Mr. Johnson came out and says, son, they always calling me son. I have to laugh at it now. The sign says Johnson, not Jones. And what he was telling me, you're getting too big for your britches. So we agreed to disagree. And I went back to California and decided to be a consultant. I'm not sure about what I was going to consult on, so I took a year off. The phone rings again in the middle of my year off, and she says, hi, it's Sandy. Same Sandy again. She says, how'd you like to work for me? I said, well, I don't think you have enough money to pay what my requirement. She says, I have more money than you think. Unlike you, I have every dime I've ever made. And she said, you don't have to work for me, just do a couple of projects. And she says, I'll pay you half of it up front. That's always her deal, half up front, half in the middle and half at the end. It's called cash flow. So one thing led to another. I did the work for her. I want to back and go back. to Johnson Products. While I was there, I came to my office at Johnson Products one morning, and we had fabulous offices. Richard Hunt, the great sculptor, his work was outside my window. You know, the amount of, when you see Black culture every day in sculptures and paintings, and you meet these folks who, from Essence and Soul Train and other Black entrepreneurs and Earl Graves, and all of those were people that I talked to just like I'm talking to you because of my relationship. When I came in one morning at 7 o'clock, and Miss Sandy was sitting in my office, and I said, "How'd you get in here?" She said, "Oh, you'd be surprised how I got in here." Now, I had 3 executive assistants, so it was impossible for you to get in my office, so I thought. But she did, and I said, "What can I help you with?" She says, "I would like to be a consultant to the company." So I said, I thought to myself, I said, "You're awful nice, and you've been a great management, what is it called, recruiter, but well, tell me about you." And she says, "Oh, I have an MBA from the Kellogg School of Business, Northwestern." Can you imagine? This is 1970, and she had graduated, had been working at Quaker, running the Captain Crunch business. It was a couple $100 million business. And she says, "I know more about this business than you do. I understand it, and you need my help." Well, I agreed I did need her help because while I had a lot of corporate experience, I didn't have any experience working in a predominantly African-American environment. It's working in predominantly African-American, there are a different set of values. There's not only the same business values, but there's a different culture going on. And she knew how to navigate that space. And so I said, "Sure." So I said, she brought the contract in, I signed it. And as usual, I sent the note out the door at the executive assistant, "Go down and have so-and-so sign this and make it happen." Now, my corporate experience at that time, I was very strategic, and my make it happen would be to say to Miss James or whoever I was working with, "Go make it happen." That was the end of it. I didn't get involved in the cash flow, whether the company had the money or not. I didn't get involved with signing any checks. That wasn't my role. So I came back into my office a week later, and there she was again. I said, "How can I help you?" She says, "Thank you for the contract, but they didn't give me any money." I said, "Well, I don't have anything to do with that. I'm not the money guy. You know, I'm the vice president of marketing and sales." And she says, "Well, I can't start the contract till I get paid because I don't finance my clients' work." Lesson. It's a great lesson for young entrepreneurs. Great to get the assignment, but you got to get paid, and you got to get paid in some terms that work. As head of your company, one of the heads of your companies, and the CFO, you understand cash flow, and you understand that small minority or any kind of business can't afford to bank the client. Bank the client means pay for their service and you get paid later. No, no. You pay me and I'll pay them on time the way we agreed. So I called down and I said, "This young lady's down here saying y'all didn't give her any money." "Oh, we didn't know." I said, "Cut her a check and give her half her money and look at the terms of the contract." That same strategy, we're now married for 34 years. Now have one daughter. And that same pricing strategy and cash flow strategy we even use today. Last week we were doing a deal with a city government, and we had to explain to them, we don't finance deals. You know, you want your deal financed? Go to the bank. We're not the bank. And we say it in a polite way. So, you know, imagining the business, contracting the business is one thing. Collecting the money is another. So fast forward to, I did a great couple projects for Sandy, and I decided that I would move. I had gone back to California. I decided I'd go back to Chicago. And when I got there, someone says, "You know, your friend Sandy's sick." So I come from one of those families where men open doors and we bring chocolates and roses, you know, I'm the old-fashioned type. I learned that from my mother. We always had a card or something nice if someone was sick. And went by to see, and sure enough, she was really sick. And I got to know her and talk to her, and um, over a 5-year period or 4-year period, we became friends. And she said to me one day, you know, um, I'm a single woman. We both were going through and finishing our divorces, unfortunately, but that's the way it is sometimes. Um, and she says, I go to a lot of places, but I don't have anyone to take me. So I said, oh, I'll be glad to take you. I said, but you know, I'm a late night owl. She says, yes, and I'm an early night owl. I go to bed at 9 o'clock. And I said to myself, isn't that great? Because I don't go out to the club till 11:30. You know, I'm just a bachelor having a good time. I'm, you know, in my early 30s, and life was what it was. Work hard, play hard.
Mhm.
And so one thing led to another. um, I said to her one day, about 5 years, and I said, "You'd probably make somebody a really nice wife." And she says, "Of course I would." And I thought about it and didn't say anything because I wasn't about to think about getting married again. I'd done that when my children were teenagers, and so I wasn't. So finally, one day I said to her, "I'm going to Buffalo to visit my parents." My parents and I were close, especially my mother and I. And Sandy came, and if you ever see a picture, she's a very beautiful woman, but well educated and smart. And I said, "I'm going to visit my parents. Would you like to go?" She says, "Sure. I'd love to meet your parents." So we went to Buffalo, and my mother says, "Hey, where did she come from?" I said, "Just a friend of mine. You know, we come up here to see Niagara Falls and have a nice time." And my father says, "You know, she's kind of cute." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, you know." I thought it was that kind. And one thing led to another. I later said to Sandy, I asked her to marry me. And she said she would think about it. I said, "What did you think about?" She says, "A lot. You know, it's not an impulse." And then she says, "I have some terms and conditions." I said, "What kind of terms and conditions?" She says, "Oh, I have to have a baby." Oh my gosh. You know, I'm old enough now to understand that you got to take care of baby, and it's a lifelong process to love and take care of a child. And I said, "I don't think so. I can't do that." You know, I've I've been to my last Girl Scout meeting, my Boy Scout meeting. I've done it, and I promise the Lord I'll not do this again. So I came back. My mother said, "What happened to Cutie Pie?" I said, "Oh, Cutie Pie wants a baby." She said, "So what's wrong with that?" I said, "Because it's a lot of responsibility." She says, "You mean to tell me that you wouldn't even think about having a baby with a nice looking girl like that?" She called her a girl like that, well educated, smart. And my father says, and got her own money too, you know? She ain't got her hand out. Now, these are my parents talking to me. So I thought about it, and I came back and I said to Sandy in 6 months, I said, "Okay, one baby." She says, "No, I got to have two babies." I said, "Oh, two babies? And what's wrong with you?" So that led to the agreement that we would have one child. And then she said, "You know, I think it would be a good idea if I managed the money on the businesses and we went together, because you're a great marketing person, but a lousy business manager." True. She says, you're okay, but I can handle money, and it's true, better than you. And I never liked to handle the financial part, not my area of strength. Mine was on the strategic side and the execution, get the job done. So we agreed that we would merge our businesses. And then she said, "I got one more thing." I said, "What else do you want?" She says, "I would like to move to North Carolina." I don't think so. Why would I want to move to North Carolina? I'm living in Chicago in a high rise on the 65th floor with all the services you can imagine at Lake Point Tower. And so that was the kind of world that I lived in at the time. She says, because you'll live longer, because you'll have a higher quality of life, and because um, I need to go home and see about my parents. One of the things about, I guess all women, but African American women in particular, they always want to look out for their parents. They always want to do what they can to take care of their parents. So I reluctantly agreed and did it. I was telling her just this past week, what a great move from a large metropolitan city to a small southern city. Had difficulties at first adjusting because it's a different lifestyle. Um, and but it's been great. I've learned a lot, and in the process became a Christian, believe it or not. My friends lost their money on that one. I have to laugh. It's an inside story about how I became a Christian. It's another day. Um, but that's my story. I'm a small town Buffalo guy, lived in a lot of cities, worked for major corporations, lived to talk about it. I'm now in my late 70s and living a high quality life. My wife was absolutely right. She says, you'll live longer, you'll be happier, and you will do more. And one of the crowning, we did, by the way, have that baby, who is now 31, who went to undergraduate school at Spelman, presidential scholar, went on to become a doctor at Eastern Carolina University as a doctor of dental surgery. And just last week, graduated after another 3 years of getting postdoctoral work and became a certified orthodontist. Only 10,000 of them in the country. I'm talking about of any kind against a population that's 300 million. So they're rare indeed. So life has gone on, and that's my story.
Wow. You know, Mr. Jones, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the breath. And I'm sure there's so many things that were left out because you've lived such a wonderful, long, exciting life. When you look back, who are some of the influences in your life that you attribute to being who you are and the different things you were able to do from being young as a child to a young man to an older man? What were some of those influences in your life, and why were they important?
I had the best. I've had the best people as mentors and helpers. You know, I must tell you that if you knew my friends, they're quite amazed that I even lived this long and became as calm as I am now, because I had a really nice time, still having a nice time, but a different kind of time. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So first, I am a product of the YMCA. And there was a man there named Mr. Fred Barkley, who taught me to swim. We liked to fight a lot. We liked to beat each other up. And he used to say, you want to fight? And yeah. And he would give us boxing gloves and put us in the ring and make us fight until we dropped. He stopped us from wanting to fight each other all the time because he gave us an opportunity. Oh, go right at it, you know? So Mr. Barkley was a big influence in my life. Another fellow from the boys club, Mr. Laurie, taught me to play ping pong. And he was about 7 feet tall himself and a former basketball player. And he was very special. He was like another father. And then from there, when I went to Fisk University, I had, again, the best people. Aaron Douglas, the artist. Robert Hayden, the poet. And just Mr. Yerby, just a host of people who were my mentors. There was a fellow's name was Curry, Dr. Curry. He was a European American who dedicated his life. He was from Harvard to African Americans. You know, you find at black schools there are some white professionals who dedicated their lives to helping us to move forward. When I went to Chicago, when I went to Washington, D.C., I had great mentors both in sales and in marketing and in radio. And I was involved politically with the mayor and others. Marion Barry was there. And quite contrary, Marion Barry was a very well-educated man. He went to Tennessee State, and I think he had an advanced degree in math or chemistry. Um, Unlike many people portray him, he had his trials and tribulations, but if you look at his background, and then I had classmates who were spectacular. Um, John Lewis was there, but he was kind of a quiet guy. He was always going to Selma and coming back with bandages on his head. um, and when I went to New York, I had a number of people inside of Lever Brothers who helped me understand the corporate hierarchy. And by the time I got to Minnesota, there was another set. It's like all along the way, I've had people who, for one reason or another, helped me. And then when I went to California, I met another group of men and women who were not in necessarily my field, because there were very few Black folks in marketing going up the ladder. They were coming out of Harvard and coming out of Northwestern and other major schools and other schools with their MBAs and so forth. And another fellow who was European American was William Smith, who founded Smith Buckland and Associates. They managed 700 global associations simultaneously from 3 cities, London, DC, and Chicago. And he said to me, he's a friend of Mr. Redenbacher's, remember, these are about relationships. Mr. Redenbacher introduced me to him because I was on the board of the Popcorn Institute. And as its largest member, and I was responsible for Redenbacher, I got a chance to meet all the related industries, whether it was manufacturing of equipment to 5,000 acres of popcorn, this all, how to grow it and where to grow it. So I had a lot of context. In terms of the mentors, I had the best. And then Mr. George Johnson is a $50 million guy. Later, I became vice president along the way of Johnson Publishing, where I met one of my greatest mentors, John H. Johnson. Mr. Johnson is the creator of Ebony Magazine, Ebony Jr., and Jet. And Mr. Johnson was all they say he was and more. And he was a friend, he was a mentor, and I'm telling you, they don't come any tougher, any rougher than him, because here's a guy who came from the deep South with just a small amount of education. I don't think he went to college at that time. And he worked for S.B. Fuller. He was one of the, if you heard of Mr. Fuller, yes. S.B. Fuller was along, I met him and knew him as well. I didn't know him very well, but I knew him through Mr. George Johnson and John H. Johnson, both of whom were mentees of his. So I was a mentee of the mentees. And then I had the opportunity through Mr. Bill Smith to open an association management company. And my first client was the American Health and Beauty Aids Institute, the proud lady, you've seen that Black woman with the curly hair and the wavy hair. And so I was its first president, its founding president. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years. And so I got a chance to meet Cornell McBride, who created Stay Soft Fro M&M products. It is now called McBride Laboratories. It's a multi-million-dollar company. When I met Mr. McBride, he had just a few years before left pharmacy school and created Stay Soft Fro, which had a humectant in it, which makes your hair soft. One of the early products, he made $10 million in his first year. I worked with Edward Gardner from soft sheen products that eventually sold their product for $100 million to L'Oreal. And I had the great occasion that every Friday for 2 years, I went out in the streets with um, Mr. Gardner, and we were working in the streets on a campaign called Black on Black Love, Not Crime. He was a guy who was a former school teacher, and his family, Denise Gardner and Gary Gardner and Mrs. Gardner, all were part of that. And then if you look across the horizon, we had about 25 members, and I knew them all. Comer Cottrell, who created the first Curly kit. He made about $15 million on that in about 18 months. These are really smart people. And most of them had no background at all in the field of manufacturing, production, distribution, marketing, strategy, or finance. They just were smart people. You know, they say native intelligence. They weren't MBAs. Some of them had college degrees, most did not. And so I met Mr. Bundles. Um, you may know his daughter has just written a new piece that's being streamed about Madam C.J. Walker. You've seen my work. Well, we knew him well. I know all of their children who are now in their 50s and 60s. So I got a chance to meet not only hair care royalty, but also publishing royalty, because in each one of these cities, New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Miami, there were Black publications, newspapers, because as we were talking earlier, those were the people putting out the word on behalf of the community, to the community and outside the community. Earl Graves was one of those folks who came along, and so did the people from Essence magazine. I would say to my staff, I'd call up Clarence Smith, who was president of Essence, and I'd say, Clarence, no need coming by here. We'll buy 24 pages, send us an invoice. End the discussion, because we knew they could deliver. And they did. And that included Susan Taylor and all the great folks at Essence Magazine and Ebony Magazine, all the Black newspapers. I can tell you many a day I flew from Chicago to LA with a check for $50,000 in my pocket. As Mr. Johnson would say, you make sure that Don gets this right away. Don is Don Cornelius. He said, you make sure Don gets this as soon as the plane lands. Because these folks understood. Mr. Bronner, N.H. Bronner, the Bronner brothers, called me. He was a member, one of my mentors, called me in the middle of the night one night and said, there's a Black guy here in Georgia that's going to lose his farm and all of his equipment. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. Now I'm just getting in those days, but and I wasn't married yet, so I could stay out late, you know. He says, he'd always call Mr. Jones, I want you to call up the boys, in the finest sense of the word, which meant his counterparts, and tell them we need $100,000 for a daybreak to make sure that the banks don't take this Black farmer's land and his equipment. Before daybreak, called on the phone, on the private lines in the middle of the night, and they would answer, and we had the cup full of money to go and protect this family. So I worked with people who believed in the point of reciprocity, believed in giving back to our community, understood its culture, and they didn't come out of business school. These are just fine human beings, and they were both large and small. There was one in particular that came out of Oklahoma. His family had been involved in the Oklahoma massacre. Chappie Cannon was his name, and he was one of the, you've never heard of him. There's a slew of Black men and women who dedicated their lives to beauty and to publishing and to the fields to supply us. Because, there was a time when you, if you went, that you couldn't find our products in the store. And I want to credit Corky Walgreen. We went to him. Corky Walgreen was at the time CEO and primary owner of Walgreens. And we said to him, we have an association and we'd like to have distribution in your 2,200 stores. And we went out to, we flew out one day and went all the way to Hawaii to have a meeting with him. And he said yes. And that meant that every one of our members, that they had to meet a certain grade and we product packaged a certain way, were able to get in on that deal. And we sold millions of dollars of product to Walgreens. Walgreens opened the door to everyone else. And that's when the section was created where you could find Black products for women. I could go on in minutes. You asked the question, who are my mentors? I had the best. I still have the best.
Got you, got you. So I have to, this is a signature question of the Voices of a Black Man. When did you realize you weren't a young man, but a Black man, and what did that mean to you?
That's a great question. Let me just think about that for a moment. The realization happened at different times for different reasons, different perspectives. First, my mother, Jimmy Root Jones, and her 7 sisters were Southerners. Southerners have a different mentality, although most Northerners, Black Northerners, are Southerners because they were part of the Great Migration from 1900. But I come from a family of women. There were 7 sisters. So that's meant I had 7 aunts. And so they all had husbands and children and so forth. So it was through them. When I went to FIS, I learned the National Black Anthem for the first time. I didn't know what that was. My father had 7 brothers and sisters who were laborers in the steel mills. They poured molten steel for Lackawanna and Bethlehem Steel, and they worked for chemical companies. And so the folks who left the South to come north came there to work, and that's what our history has been. When I went to FIS, again, Fisk University, I learned my history. I mean, not that I didn't know who I was, I didn't know who I really was, or who I didn't know my roots. And it, you know, if you know where you came from and you know the kind of things that our people have done, and you know, and you can document it in your head. I became a history and government major, much to my parents' unhappiness, because they had set out for me to be a dentist that our daughter later became. I laugh because I'm sure my father kind of worked on that behind the scenes. And I say that, you know, after he passed away and so forth, spiritually. But I had awakening of who I was as a Black man all the time throughout my life, because I met such smart and tough and responsible Black men. You know, we helped to get Harold Washington elected. A friend of mine named Grace Mitchell, who passed away recently, was a director who worked at Johnson Products, and he went to head up Harold Washington's campaign. I was in the room when Mr. Washington said, I need $1 million to run. And Ed Gardner put up from South Sheen Products, committed to first million. So these are no joke people who understood what time it was. So when you see other Black men, other Black people, and not just men, women too, and there were some white folks along the way that made big contributions. I don't want to leave them out. Sometimes we forget that we've had to have a lot of allies along the way. And it is true that not real happy about some of the things that have happened in the past, to our community, not at all. Um, and, we come from the school. Some of us, you and I were talking recently about this. We're not just speaking, we've been speaking up a long time. Maybe no one has been hearing. We also had to live for another day. You could not go in these corporations and tell off the boss where he could get off. You might want to, but we had to be smart. It's like we teach our young black men now. When the police stop you, there's a certain way you need to behave so you can live to tomorrow. Because we've all heard about the unfortunate things that have happened in terms of the massacres and the riots and the knee on our neck. It's not new. This has been happening a long time. So we had to learn as young black men how to navigate that space and live to tomorrow. So while you might want to get up and start fighting for your rights, because you have a right to be spoken to in a certain way, you have a right not to be stopped. Sometimes it wasn't the right time for you to display your rights because you're outnumbered and they had a gun. So I say to our young brothers and sisters, who I'm very pleased about what you all are doing, there's a time and place for everything. You have to be strategically smart. And when people say that John Lewis and Julian Bond and all those people took their lives in their hand, it's no joke. They did. It's an absolute miracle that John Lewis lived as long as he did, because the places he went and the beatings that he took, I wasn't there because I wasn't going to do that. But when you see him come back with these stitches on the side of his head, and he's got bandages, he's wrapped up, this gentleman, young man, was a fierce advocate of what he believed. And there were lots of people who supported him. So the answer to your question is, the realization that I was a black man continues to this day. And it has grown over time because of the people who helped us. Yeah. And also, black women have a lot to do, and I'm married to a black woman, with who we are. I got stopped by the police with my wife in the car, and I really was not speeding. I just happened to be driving a nice new Mercedes, and this cop came up, policeman came up on the side, and he was not African American, in the middle of South Carolina, and with his hand on his gun like I was going to do something. And I stopped, I put my hands on top of the wheel, I turned the engine off, and when he finished speaking to me, not so nice either, and I'm just raging inside, my wife said to me, "Sure handled that well, didn't you?" As we drove away with a big ticket, which we hired a phalanx of lawyers to go beat their brains out about why we not supposed to have this ticket. But we lived for another day. So the realization that we are black and we are black men has increased over time. And I also had the experience of, all of us as black people have people in our families who have been incarcerated. Yeah. It's just the way it is. For lots of times for petty things, sometimes for real things. So as a boy, I went to visit relatives in jail, which was an unusual experience. And I never went to jail because I was afraid. And my father would say, "That's not going to happen in here if we have to kill you." I always wanted to be a gangster. Like young men now, they want to be a rapper. And that's okay. I wanted to be a gangster. And my father would say, "I don't think so. You're not going to be any gangsters in here," because he knew what the downside was. So, and I also learned a lot about that. And we also, when our money was short and I was a boy, my parents would not pick cotton, but pick beans and strawberries and berries, sometimes to raise bail money for members of our family, sometimes to make ends meet. My father worked in the post office for 45 years at night and ran his businesses in the daytime for 45 years. So I had a first class, hands on demonstration of what a Black man who was responsible for his immediate family and his 7 brothers and sisters and my mother's family, what Black men could do, who were hardworking. They worked in the post office, they worked in chemical plants, they worked in steel plants. They had some of the worst jobs you can imagine, talking about environmental hazards. Do you have any idea what it takes to pour 40,000 tons of molten steel from one vat to another? Well, every day somebody makes a mistake, and guess what? You'd be gone. There weren't any environmental controls in place. Black folks had the worst jobs. And my grandfather saying to me, who had worked for a company, steel company, for 30 plus years, that he was so happy to get promoted from the molten steel area to become a janitor. So he could retire as a janitor, because this was every day they went and didn't know if they were coming back or not, but they took care of their families. And people try to say things about Black men, that we're not responsible. Sometimes that's true, but it is not the record. The record is that we have a strong history. Now, I sometimes say to our sisters, let's don't raise any sons that nobody likes but you. Meaning, these young men got to stand up now. They got to do the right thing. And sometimes in the love of our children, um, and I say this to Black women, and Black women can be tough too, but sometimes, we can't be making excuses about I didn't get up and go to do whatever. Another thing I just mentioned, I knew I was a Black man after I graduated from college, and I went at the time, read in the newspaper that General Motors, the great General Motors in Buffalo, New York, at the Delaware Avenue stamping plant, that's where they stamped tons of metal to make parts for cars. And it said, we're looking for college graduates that we'd like to train to be in our management. Well, I took my degree in my hand, and I took this full-page ad, and I went to the company, and I got to the employment window, and this is what the lady says. She says, what would you like? I said, I saw this ad in the newspaper, and I held it up. I have a college degree, held it up. I'd like to apply for this job as college graduate in training, CGIT is what it was called, college graduate in training. And this lady said to me with a clear look in my eyes, we do not hire your kind for those kind of jobs. Now, if I hadn't been trained to fight back, and I don't mean just physically, mentally, I would have walked away, but I didn't. I saw a group of white men with shirts and ties like I had on. I took my jacket off because they didn't have jackets on, all had short sleeves, and I followed them into the security door. I'm 21, 20. And I got there, I sat down in the lobby, because they all went into the production area, the rest of the plant. It was a 10 city block long facility, big facility, and big waiting room. And I sat down, and I didn't say anything, I just looked around. And the lady said, executive secretary said, mister, you've been sitting here a while, how can we help you? I said, I'm here to see, and I looked up and I saw that at the top of the list, the general manager. I said, I'm here to see Mr. So-and-so. She said, oh, you're here to see him? I said, yes. Didn't know so. So she comes over and she says, well, Mr. So-and-so we don't have a record of an appointment for you. Well, I knew that, you know. And I said, yes, I have an appointment. And finally, this man was a spectacular person. He knew something was amiss. He got up from his desk on the top floor and came down and came with me. He says, son, I don't know you. Why are you here? And I said, you see this ad you ran in the newspaper? You see this college degree? I got one. And I want to apply for the job. But the lady out there says she doesn't hire my kind. And he looked at me and he says, oh my Lord, we've been running this ad for months and nobody comes. Well, I bet you a lot of people came, but if you will, for lack of a better word, I won't disparage the lady. She was ignorant, you know. She was turning us away at the door. Well, needless to say, I got the job. Needless to say, through interviewing and good training and so forth, I was awarded the job. So that was the time when I knew I was a Black man, when the lady told me, oh, we don't hire your kind for that kind of work. Now, you have a couple of choices in life. You can sit around and complain and talk about Gene and awful, but if you've got to feed yourself and your family and you're trying to get ahead in life, you can't sit around complaining about this or Gene and awful, didn't they do us wrong? Yeah, it is awful. Yeah, they treat us.
Uh-oh. So it appears something happened with Mr. Jones's email. We lost him, so hopefully he'll come back on. If he doesn't, I want to thank you all for just giving some patience. We are live. This is a live interview, and I don't know about you, but I have so enjoyed every piece of this interview. It's been so amazing to watch, to see. This is really what the Voices of a Black Man is about, to show through different men's lenses just life as they've known it to be. Their dreams, their aspirations, their accomplishments, to show how all Black men are not alike, that there are great Black men in this world, and there are more great Black men in this world than there are of what we see in mainstream white media, of being drug dealers and incarcerated and not taking care of their kids, and just all those negative images that we see all the time. Am I saying that that does not exist? Absolutely not. Not at all. But what I am saying is there's more than what we're seeing. And at some point in life, if that's all you're seeing, then that's all you can believe. And so I wanted to bring a platform, a place where Black men felt safe, a safe space to just be seen and heard and just be listened to. Because at the end of the day, we all, no matter who you are, deserve to be seen and heard, period. Everyone deserves to be seen and heard. Because when we're seen and heard, that then gives each and every one of us a different lens to see through. I can only see through my lens. You can only see through your lens, until we take the time to listen to someone else and see through their lens. Doesn't mean that we understand everything. Doesn't mean that we agree with everything. But it also means that now I have a chance to be educated in a different way. And maybe some things that I've been taught in life weren't exactly right. And that's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's a very hard pill to swallow. A pill of, you mean what I was taught, what I grew up with, what people said around me, people that I love, people that I cherish, people who took care of me may not have told me the right thing. Maybe they didn't know any better. Maybe they did. Who knows? But what I do know is at some point in our lives, we are responsible for us. I am responsible for me. I can no longer blame where I am, my hurts, my pains, my guilt on the past. I have to take responsibility for those things. And in taking responsibilities for those things, I can listen to other people, see through their lens, and then check my own biases, whether they be unconscious or conscious biases. that I know I have or don't even have an idea that I have. Either way, I can check them. Not only can I check them, I can then look to be educated more, to put into action, to learn more, to learn different things, to be a better person, a better human, to love in a better and different way than what I knew to love in. Embracing people that maybe I never thought that I would be able to embrace. You know, as you look at all the stories that we told, today marks the 30th story that the Voices of Black Men has brought to the viewers. And I'm so excited about that. I'm so proud of that. Each and every one of them are different. Each and every one of them have their own backgrounds and experience. And each and every one of them have gone into their own fields, even if they were in the same fields, the way they got there, who their mentors were, or why they're there, are all different. But one thing remains the same. They are human, they are men, they are Black. And just because of their skin color, they've been treated differently. There's been a different set of rules. I want you to think about that for a moment. Whatever ethnicity that you may be watching this, think about yourself, then think about others. What rules do you have to play by? Do the rules constantly change? Are there exceptions to the rules because of who you are just by skin color? Are there harder rules because of the skin color? You see, when we think about these things and think at the core of things, the very core, we have to look at policies. We have to look at laws. We have to look at rules. It makes a difference. We can be the change that we need. One, in our households, in our communities, in America, and in the world. Thank you for coming back, Mr. Jones. I knew you'd come back. We're waiting for his audio to come on. Let's see. Get you off of mute here. There we go.
How was that?
That is perfect. And you were perfect timing because I just wrapped up a little segment while you were gone. So that was perfect timing. So I only have a few questions for you. What'd you say?
Better be glad I figured it out.
I'm glad you figured it out too. You know, I was over here praying, but I wasn't gonna say nothing. I knew you could. I knew you could. You're a smart man. I knew you could get it going. I have to ask you, I know you have a PowerPoint presentation that I want to talk about so that we can look at some of the things that you're doing right now. But one question before we go to that is, because you grew up in the civil rights movement, I would be remiss to ask you this question. Looking back then and looking at today's times and the things that are happening, what thoughts come to you?
The battle continues. That's what comes to me. It's just, look, the destination remains the same, whether it's 2020 or 50 years before. We want our freedom. We want the same rights as everyone else in America. People ask the question, well, what do Black people want? We want the same thing everybody else wants. We want to raise our families in peace. We want to have the best education for our children that we can acquire. We want to live in safe communities. We want, for those of us as entrepreneurs, we want the same opportunity as everyone else when it comes contract time. We want to be able to use our God-given talents. Now, this is like a ladder, a stairway on the way up. Every 20 years, which is a generation roughly, there are a different set of things that come up. One of the things that we were big on is we want to be able to eat in the restaurant, stay in the hotel, you know, not when I was a boy and we went places, we couldn't stay in the hotel. We had to go to people's homes to stay. Not because we didn't have the money, because they didn't want us there. You had to pack your lunch because they didn't want to serve you at the restaurants. Bet you they do now. These national corporations and chains would be out of business tomorrow if Black folks stopped buying and eating and consuming their products. They learn better. So the battle goes on. It's at a different level. It's more intense. We're a lot smarter about it. I listen to how articulate you and other program producers and on radio and especially television now. I'm just amazed as how articulate and strategic our young folks are and who are carrying the battle forward. Now, I think sometimes it gets a little bit misplaced, a little bit, but that's okay. You know, we are entitled to make our mistakes too. You know, we're not perfect people, and our parents and we are not. So, what I see is we have the same battles, just at different level. Now, 20 years from now, they'll be, look, Black people are the conscience of America. We are the soul of America in the finest sense of the word. The civil rights movement spawned and spurred the women's movement. It spurred the movement to allow people to have access to buildings who were handicapped. Okay, those lessons that John Lewis and other people before him and after us and so forth, we're standing up, people talk about it all the time, stand their shoulders. It's true. It's progress. And you had Farad Ali recently on and interviewed him. He's a friend of mine and a friend of his for a long time. There's a young man just got a couple $100 million company that he's in charge of. Now, a lot goes with that, tough cookie, you know, and I'm wishing that he would do the very, very best. So it's the same battle, except at a different level. John H. Johnson, the founder of Ebony and Jet and Johnson Publishing and Fashion Fair Cosmetics, his company was worth $500 million when he left, when he passed away. Before him was S.B. Fuller, who had one of the largest cosmetic companies in the U.S. So he was a disciple of Mr. Fuller. So was Joe Dudley. Okay, now you have Ursula Dudley, who's running the Dudley products, and you have Joe Dudley Jr. and their family doing other things. The same with Nathaniel Bronner and the Bronner brothers on the beauty side. His 5 sons, who have all strategically placed, being led by their mother, who's the matriarch of the family, the soul of their family, built on what his father did. So, and his children, 2 of his daughters followed my daughter to, grandchildren rather, to Spelman, twins, and they're doing great things. So, as my friend Frazier says, success runs in our race. You know, if you read his books or not, or he's another. So that's what I see. I see more of the same battle, but approachingly smart. Now, I do think it is not smart to go riot and burn up things in our community. That people have been doing that. That's just dumb. And they did that in 1965 too, and 1968. And I don't know what it is, but it's still not smart. We have to approach the battle for our freedom in a very strategic way. What does that mean coming up? We got to get out and vote. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. No, I'm voting for, and I hope you know who you're voting for. But voting is important, that we exercise that right. And as we improve our lives, we will help America to be better. Now, we do have our brothers and sisters, many of whom still lack a good education. Education is the key. And many of whom lack some of the essentials. But the great leadership and the great brains are also going to come from that group. Because you remember, the only difference between some of the people, like the beauty care people and the publishers, they didn't have a lot of education. They're just smart. Just smart. And so you're going to find children who are growing up with less than they need to have. Many of them will become successful, but we have to reach back. Now we see our celebrities. Our celebrities are catching on. We didn't caught on before. Harry Belafonte was the head of that pack long time ago. I sit at Mrs. King's house and Dr. King's house, and he was there with other celebrities using their God-given gifts to move the movement ahead. So we're seeing our basketball players and other celebrities founding foundations and giving money. Look, no one gets out of here alive, I like to say. So the question of the measurement is, what did you do between 0 and 0? What is 0 and 0? 0 is the day you're born, that's 0, 1, and 0, 2 is the day that you leave the planet. So the only measure of your worth is, what did you do for your family and your community, and I mean Black folks in particular and others too, to make a difference?
Mhm.
That's my answer.
Now, thank you. I'm going to put up your PowerPoint, because it leads greatly into what you are doing now and what you have been doing for a while, for the community, as well as you are entrepreneur and building your company and your wife's company together. So you tell me when to change the slide, and I'm going to change the slide for you, and you can tell us a little bit about what you have going on.
Okay. You see those two symbols at the bottom? One is the globe, that's my wife's company, and the other, SMSI Urban Call. The
Yes.
next slide. Next slide, please. We are totally devoted to health. We have found in all of our experiences, other people knew this too, but the most important thing we can do is improve the health of our community. So we use all of our marketing services. We've organized churches and beauty salons and barbershops, and we have publishing operations to carry the message of good health. Next slide, please. A large number of us are diabetics. A large number of us have high blood pressure. I know a few brothers and sisters, brothers in particular, who have high blood pressure. We have worked for a number of corporations and small organizations, carrying the word to where we work, play, study, worship, entertain, etc. And as stores, carrying information in that will improve. In terms of health, we usually have late diagnosis, whether it's cancer or diabetes or other chronic diseases, which means we're at stage 4 when you get diagnosed. So we've got to do better. So we use all of our free product sampling, our promotions, but what we do, we're doing these things on a scale, 15, 20 markets, 2 to 3 million people at a time. But it all starts in zip codes. There are 28,000 zip codes in the US, and you can find Black folks and Latinos in about 8,000 of them, and also in rural America. So if you go ahead, these are some of the services. We have a new service. These are some of our customers. We like to say we work for the smartest people on the planet with the deepest pockets, because it takes money to do good. It takes commitment. So we work for Alberto Culver, for example. We did a low sodium diet program for them. We sampled 50,000 consumers with a spaghetti made from Mrs. Dash. Mrs. Dash is a low salt alternative. We worked for Magic Johnson and Aetna and AARP and did health fairs across the country. We worked with Quaker, which is Sandy's original company, to, if you eat oatmeal every day, it's good for you for real in terms of a good diet. We now, Sandy has started an insurance group, because our people are uninsured, but also those of us who are insured, we need more help in learning how to use the insurance. No need having all these good policies, health policies, if you're not following the doctor's orders in terms of taking your prescriptions if you have to do that. Or, you know, I'm in my late 70s. I can tell you more than I care to know about my own health because I've learned. We just finished a great study at the clinical trial study at Wake Forest University, teaching us how to consume, how to exercise. Now we've organized, as you can see here, networks. We've got 10,000 churches, it's the middle column. We've got another 10,000 beauty salons. We got 100. These are points of touch. These are points of where we can distribute a free product sample, develop, send a publication. We have a publication called Urban Call, which you'll see on the next slide. These are all discrete networks that we market through. This is a campaign. This is my beautiful wife, Sandy, told you about. Sandy has started an insurance group, and she signed up thousands of people for Obamacare. President Obama's work is still doing good. For example, there is a clause in the Affordable Health Care Act that allows anyone who's lost their job or about to lose their job and has employer-based insurance to have that replaced. And they can qualify year-round under certain things. There are millions of people who are unemployed right now. Many of them are Black people. But, you know, as they say, the old days, our people perish for the lack of knowledge. So her program that she's running is teaching people how to get affordable health care. Now, for those of us who are over 65, and I hope everybody gets to be over 65, but they won't if they don't practice certain health practices. But the point here is that knowledge is power. For those on Medicare, there are all kinds of programs under, some call extra help under Medicare. I mention these because I want the listeners on the air and who's seeing this broadcast to know that there's help for those above 65 and those under 65. Next slide, please. We've dedicated our lives. This is one of our publications. We do them in English and in Spanish. This is a program we did for Johnson & Johnson. By the way, Ambi Skincare was purchased by an African-American group out of Baltimore. Most people don't know that. Black woman, who I know, put that together and bought the company. Good news for her. Next slide, please. We have community ambassadors in these 2,800 zip codes. They work for us on an as-needed basis. They're in Orlando, Atlanta, Chicago, Winston-Salem, Raleigh-Durham, New York, Boston, Detroit, Oakland, wherever Black folks and Latino folks live, we can touch them with a sample, a publication, a message. We just started a new campaign. We've gotten involved in the virus program, coronavirus. We're distributing masks, M-A-S-K, hand sanitizers, and healthy literature about how to overcome this. And one thing I'm really glad to see, I see a lot of folk, especially Black folks, we're wearing our masks. I think we get the message. And for those who don't, let's follow the rules because we can save some lives, including our own. Next, please. Now, I can't say enough about Jimmy Davies here, who is one of our partners. He's worked with Mr. Dudley, Dudley Products, and he has something now called Every Black, which is an entrepreneurial association. I think you're familiar with him. For 30 years, he worked as an instructor, as FileMaker. His whole premise is that we can use technology to advance our businesses. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have been able to get back on it with you if Mr. Davies had not taught me. He is dedicated, he and his sister who joined him recently, Kimberly Smith. And he has a show on, like your show, on every Monday at 8 o'clock. Tune in. It's broadcast because he understands technology, and he's my personal trainer, and I've learned so much from him, and I'm thankful for his presence.
Mhm. I mean, Mr. Davies was one of our first speakers in the first week of the Voices of a Black Man. So definitely his, you can go and check him out at our website of voicesofablackman.com. But you're right, he is amazing when it comes to technology, and truly believes that technology and economic development are the new wave of the future, right? As we're moving forward, progressing, to be better individuals, we need to take advantage of the technology that we have. And his mastermind is amazing on Mondays.
And
Absolutely.
that's just and you see he's taken all of our services and created the SMSI Urban called digital services. So in addition to all of the print services and face-to-face services we offered in the past, they now are on. He helped create a podcast for us, which is called Urban Call podcast.com, and we broadcast um, information about our publications, etc. You check it out. But I can't say enough about Mr. Davies and his kindness and the good things he's done.
So I'm going to ask you some questions because I know there was one more slide that came in late that you wanted to share and kind of talk about a little bit. I've got to pull that slide up because that one wasn't queued up, but I will be remiss. We do what's called a rapid fire. So while I'm pulling that up, I want to go into the rapid fire with you. Are you ready for that, Mr. Jones?
I don't know what it is, but I'll try.
Just a series of questions off the top of your head. All right, I promise it won't be too much. I promise. So the first one is, what is your favorite food?
I have several favorite foods, one of which is blue claw crabs. You know, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I learned to consume blue claw crabs. I also like Southern food. I'm talking about collard greens and cabbage and so forth. My intake of vegetables has increased dramatically in the last several years for good health reasons. But I like seafood. Does that answer the question?
It does. It does. What's your favorite ice cream?
Oh, I'm not ice cream eater. I am. I don't do a lot of creams and high carbohydrates.
Mm.
For all, you remember that one of the most important things for my wife and I is good health. You can't talk a good game if you can't walk or you can't get to whatever you're trying to do. So we're doing everything we know how. We're exercising 3 times a week. We belong to clinical trials. We understand our calorie count. We know our A1Cs. We're almost, but that's what you have to do. So favorite food and those kind of things has a lot to do with preservation and creation of good health.
Got you. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie. Let me think about that for a moment.
Okay. Favorite hobby?
Love to travel. Spend a lot of time traveling all over the world, especially Africa. We came back recently in the last couple of years from South Africa. What Mandela was the best. What he was able to do there. If for those of you who have not been to South Africa, I mean, it has its poverty and issues for certain, and I don't want to diminish that. But here's a person who was in jail for so many years, came out and took that nation over.
Mm.
When you go to South Africa, it's more modern than most major cities. Most people think that we're living in the bush, and some of us are, but at least in the major metropolitan. Now they have their issues, such as
Yeah.
high COVID-19 count and poverty and lack of water. But every mineral on earth, God put in South Africa. They have more natural resources than any place I've ever been, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've been to. There are a number of expatriates, many, in the beauty business who live in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and so you know, we have many, many friends who live in South Africa who are both African and who are African Americans, and some of whom are Asian and Indians. I'm talking about East Indians from India.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really truly a multicultural society, and I urge those who have not been. West Africa is wonderful too, especially Ghana and the francophone speaking countries, those countries where they speak um, French.
Yeah. Now that leads me to your favorite destination or vacation spot.
Well, I'm a beach person. I like the beach. Um, I must say that I've had probably a unique opportunity to go to every island that exists in the Caribbean because those are brothers and sisters down there with hair just like yours and the same complexion as me. Now we go from ivory white to blue black. We got everything in between. Um, but those are pretty much black run nations, and we've met the prime ministers. And spent a lot of time in. I spent a lot of time in Trinidad, which is where Stokely Carmichael is from. Most people don't know that. You don't know who Stokely Carmichael. He is a counterpart to John Lewis. Stokely Carmichael was mentioned in President Clinton's address. Not as nice as I would have liked it, but he was a big player. And Trinidad is and others a wonderful um, country. We have good friends there. Known as Anthony Smart, who was the Attorney General at one time, and his family of Smart, and Gittins, a whole family of lawyers for the last 125, 30 years.
Wow.
That's true in Jamaica too. So I love to go to the islands because they have great food, they have beautiful beaches, and they are who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're back around to favorite movies. The last question.
I don't know about their favorite movies.
What about genre?
And what do you mean by genre?
Like comedy, romance.
Well,
What type do you like to sit down and watch? Thrillers?
Well, I've had the occasion to go to many events live. Um, when you're in the beauty business, you always have tickets on the front row to everything. And so, no matter what city it was in, Mr. John Johnson said to me one day, he says, Michael's going to be here next week and you're going to be out of town in Chicago. So I'm giving you and your wife and two friends front row tickets to go to Minneapolis to see Michael Jackson. And so most of the great entertainment that I've seen has been in person.
Right.
Because a lot of the sponsorships of different things have been done by beauty companies. Beauty companies have really made major contributions to not only publishers and magazines, but also entertainment. I happen to have known Sammy Davis Jr. fairly well, especially his wife, Altaviz. And a friend of mine, Barbara Fauci, before she passed away, owned a PR company in LA. And she asked me to come on board to help her in a national tour. At the time, it was called Only in LA. And I had the occasion. I love to go to museums. And part of this training was every Saturday for about 6 months, I went to every museum and every art gallery in Washington. So I spent a lot of time, not Washington, LA. I spent a lot of time, most cities I go to, I'll always go to the art gallery or to the museum or to the arboretum. So and zoos too. America is blessed with some of the most beautiful. By the way, I want to mention this one thing. It has nothing to do with your question. There's a fellow um, who is underrated. Um, his name is Dr. Curtis. He was George Washington Carver's assistant. You know who George Washington Carver was?
Yes.
He was the Peanut Man. He was the
Yes.
one who created all these salves and so forth in Tuskegee. And Austin W. Curtis, PhD, was his young assistant. I knew
Mhm.
Dr. Curtis because he had a beauty company in Detroit called Dr. Austin W. Curtis. I'm, you haven't asked me what I'm getting ready to do next, but I've been doing it all along, but I'm going to intensify. I've become a biographer because I like to write about all these people I know, and my blog podcast is about those. As a matter of fact, I think my folks told me we're going to feature you and your husband in an upcoming article in OTC Beauty Magazine that I write for.
Mhm.
But I'm now going to consolidate all of that in some print and online form to tell the history of the Black beauty business since before Cleopatra until now.
Mhm.
So I spend a lot of my time. We have a good friend who lives in um, San Diego. Her father's Dr. Willie Morrow, and he wrote the book called um, uh, 40 Years um, Without a Comb.
Mhm.
He helped to create the first Afro pick.
Wow.
His name is Willie Morrow, and he helped to create the curl product before Jerry Redding did, if you know who that is. Um, he and his daughter Cheryl, Dr. Cheryl Morrow, um, are bringing a lot of history. So we think there's a group that I'm affiliated with, my wife and I, call History Makers. Look up History Makers, and History Makers has a 3,500 interviews, video interviews of African Americans, and it's housed in the Library of Congress. So we're starting a new initiative to get all of these folks and their children noteworthy to have videos housed in the Library of Congress. Both my wife and I and others, Cornell McBride, Coleman Cottrell, Gary Gardner, Ed Gardner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, uh, are in this collection that they put together. And so that's going to be something new. Not even there. Um, there is an underrepresentation, in my opinion, of the contributions that um, Black-owned beauty companies, Black-owned publishing companies in the world we know. And so we and I intend to do something about it. So my life's work is now focused on a healthy living every day and all the executions around that, helping my wife and her business, but now beginning to focus more on telling our story of beauty and cosmetics and cosmetology.
Yeah.
We have people, one last thing, there's a group who predates Madam C.J. Walker called the National Beauty Cultures League. This is a group of a couple thousand African American women who have the association called the National Beauty Cultures League. That is, its national president is Dr. Katie B. Catalan. And these are Black women. They're the largest group of Black female entrepreneurs in the world. They're cosmetologists. They are, um, um, and they're not only women, but they're men too. There are 125,000 Black beauty barbers, owner operators in the US, serving our population of 45 million, if you will, plus. And they're to be commended. They own land, some very, very valuable property in Logan Square in Washington, D.C. But, you know, they all need help because as we age, we need new generations to continue this. Last comment. Anything that has been created 100 years ago and still is going, like the national um, women's group in Chicago. This is what we build upon. They owned a building, um, these black women, on Washington, D.C., on Pennsylvania Avenue, down the street from the White House. They own it outright.
Wow. Wow.
So for those of you who want to, some of you want to recreate the wheel. Don't recreate the wheel. Make the wheel that we have now better. Improve it. You'll get there faster.
I think that's a very good point. A very good point. I've got your last slide that I know you wanted to make sure that we talked about a little bit. So as I'm putting it up, I'm going to ask you this last rapid fire question, and that is your favorite song.
Well, first, while you're putting up, by the way, I'll answer that in a moment. This is a line of products called Hemp Excellence that my wife and I created 2 years ago. You know, hemp is red hot, CBD oil and all of that. So we created a line of essential oils and capsules, lip balm, body lotion, body oil, and balms. And it, you know, we as Black folks have dry skin and dry hair. And so this product, it's not just for Black people, but we created it for us, and we found that everybody likes to use it. We don't own or run that company, but we created it 2 years ago for some fine entrepreneurs called Founders Hemp, the Crumley family in Asheville, North Carolina. This is a group of white folks who came to us and said, create a line for us, and we did it. And it took us a while. We learned a lot about it. We were working on some new hemp products for diabetics. So we do a lot of things. So one of our side fun things is we are looking to create solutions for diabetics. By solutions, diabetics have dry skin. Large number of Black folks, and other people too, but mainly Black folks and Asians, have diabetes, and it creates dryness in the skin. And hemp is essentially nature's finest moisturizer. So what was
Thank you for sharing. Go ahead.
What was the question that I didn't answer, please?
Yeah, I was gonna say thank you for sharing that about. I'm glad that we were able to get that that PDF to put up so you could talk about that, because that is very important. Your favorite song was the last question in the rapid fire.
Black National Anthem. Because it's been around a long time, because it expresses who we are and how far we've come. I every year serve as the MC, Master of Ceremonies, for the National Beauty Culturist League. We have speakers like Representative Clyburn, who you know from South Carolina, know of. We've had Hillary Clinton. I serve as the MC for that program. And as a result, we sang that, and so I had to learn it. And we sing it all the verses, and it's more than one verse. So I think that is one of my favorite songs, and it's being sampled and it's being played in many, many ways. By the way, I want to do a shout out for Bishop Seth Olarte of the AME Zion Church, who is my prayer partner, and he, along with Bishop Powell, are two of the leading bishops. And he's also my prayer partners. My friends will laugh and say, I have a prayer partner? Yes, I have a prayer partner. I'm old enough to try to figure I'm trying to get in the kingdom too.
Well, I have had such an amazing time in conversation with you, Mr. Jones, and I thank you for your time. One of the things that we do at the end is I'm putting myself on mute, so I can't interrupt, and giving you complete 100% the platform to say to whoever you want to say, whatever you want to say as your lasting thoughts on today. And so if you're ready for that, I'm going to go on mute and it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. James, for having me. I wish your husband was with you today, but say hello to him as well. One of the things I did not talk about is the work that we've been doing in Winston-Salem. We've been very fortunate to belong to the AME Zion, African American Episcopal Zion Church Network. That's quite a large one, the popular, uh, not sects, but one of the popular denominations of churches. And I and my family has been involved in that. My wife, who took me to church, I was a Christian before I met my wife, but not at the same level. We have developed through the leadership of Michael Suggs, who is a phenomenal leader. And we bought 15 acres of land adjacent to our church and developed it into $500 million of mixed use and commercial property. Michael Suggs is to be commended for that, and our church is to be commended for that. As a matter of fact, it was slum land that was abandoned, and we were able to build not only apartment buildings, senior independent living center, we built the True Lion headquarters. True Lion is a credit union. My family's been involved in the credit union movement since the early 1944, 45. My father-in-law, Robert A. Miller, was one of the men who helped to found that, and is on his shoulders I stand. And also was most recently appointed by the governor of North Carolina to be on the Credit Union Commission. The Credit Union Commission for State Commission, North Carolina, controls about $500 billion in savings and financial services. I served on the board of True Lion Federal Credit Union, that is about a $2.5, maybe $3 billion organization. Credit unions are the way forward for us in terms of great services, lower cost, and friendly. And we, through the credit union movement, have been able to do many things. There's a group in Durham, North Carolina, that is called the North Carolina Minority Institute, and it is doing great things. Its founder and leader, Andrea Harris, passed away recently, and but it is doing well, and it will do better. So in addition to having lots of fun and being involved in things nationally, I've been very much involved in the local scene, both at the church level and at the credit union level, both in the general market side. I've been actually, you hear people say all the time, I'm blessed and highly favored. I don't run around and say that, but I am. And most importantly, one of our dreams has come true, and that our daughter has made the grade. I have two other daughters, one that lives in California, is a caretaker for people who are ill, and another who is retiring from American Airlines. So we're blessed that our children are doing well. And they say all the time, well, Black kids aren't doing well. Well, that's not true. Some Black children aren't doing well, and some are doing very well. We want them all to do well. So the children, in the finest sense of the word, are our future. But meanwhile, right now, we must focus on helping America get its act together in terms of our health. We're faced by a tremendous crisis. This coronavirus is a terrible thing. And we also have the unemployment of high levels and every other thing that goes along with that. Many of the businesses, Black businesses, have been hit very hard. They say about 40 to 50% of Black businesses previously founded will not be able to go forward. So we have to have national leadership at the presidential and vice presidential level and others. And there are a number of young folks like yourself and other elected officials stepping up to the plate. But We need to help America do better, because when we do better, America does better. And I think that I haven't always been, I've not been not unpatriotic, but I now understand what it means. Our people, my father was with the Tuskegee Airmen. I once said to my father when I was a sassy 13-year-old, and we went by the flag and he saluted and I didn't. And he says, "Why aren't you saluting?" And I said, "Why would I salute the flag and how bad they treated you? Wouldn't even let you do this and do that. Look how they," and he said to me, "Don't ever say it again." It has been an imperfect situation, but we've lived through it and it's gotten better, and we love America. That was my father, who suffered like the rest of Black people, a lot of things, but we've been patriots for a long time, and we have been supportive, and we have helped to make America a better place to be. And if we can get it through everyone else's, the future of the country lies with helping those who are most downtrodden lift us up. That's what I say.
Mr. Jones, again, I am humbled and honored for you to just come and speak to your story through your lens of just sharing.
I got one more thing to say. You asked me to say it?
Yes, sir.
I have found that there are 4 things that make people successful.
Okay.
They're always the same 4 things. All these people I talked to you about that I know and I met and who helped me along the way. First of all, they all have faith. Okay? They have faith. Whether that is in Jesus Christ as we believe him to be, or none of them, they're faithful people. They believe in faith. They also have confidence in what they're doing. I don't mean they know everything, but they have confidence that it's going to be better and get better. And they also are confident. Some of the most confident people I've ever met are people who said, "Would you help me do this? I don't know how to do this." I think that's one of the reasons that some of the people I talked about have been so successful, because they would go into a meeting or a situation and let the people who knew the most about it, sometimes it included me and others, take the floor. They weren't afraid they were confident enough in themselves and what they were doing. Then disciplined, to doing the right thing at the right time. It's always been an area that I had to work on. Discipline is a hard one. Discipline when it comes to health, discipline when it comes to finance, discipline in any way. And then the last one, which is a real killer in terms of getting it done, is determination. These are people, and I talked about, no matter what, they're determined. Jimmy Davies is one of those people. He gonna get it done. Joe Dudley is one of those people. Cornell McBride, Comer Cottrell, you name them. Grayson Mitchell, those here and gone, those were some of the, and I didn't mention any women, but there are just tons of women that I've been to. My wife is one. I've learned more discipline from my wife than any other person. So confidence, discipline, determination, and faith are the 4 keys that will carry you forward.
Wow. Wow. I am glad that you interrupted me and you gave us those. I'm glad, because everyone needs to hear that. Everyone needs to understand that. Thank you so much for your wisdom, from speaking from your heart, and about your experiences. To our viewers, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for listening to Mr. Lafayette Jones as he told his story through his lens. Now you've listened, the next part is up to you. There may have been something that was said that you never heard before, through a different lens than you've ever seen before, or things were put in a different way than you ever heard them be put before. I urge you to reach out and figure out, what biases do you have, unconscious or consciously? What biases are there? And then to take the next step, to take actions to change that. You see, it's me changing my biases and you changing your biases, accepting each other and loving each other at the human level first, that allows us to then change family, communities, America, and the world. I'm CK James. This has been the Voices of a Black Man. You can check out more speakers on www.voicesofablackman.com. And until next time, we say thank you and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Mr. Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you.